This video is intended to describe a lightblade talisman named Endless Joy. It's a very rather high-yield exotic variation of a lightblade talisman, and to help me assist me on this journey today will be my whimsical stick figure chakra map, which I'll be utilizing quite a bit for visual stimulation reference Q. And without further ado, I'll get straight into the construct. So I guess I'll go ahead and start with the premise of the figure 8 seen right here, with this primary blade band igniting like so, grounded into this lateral band of the transmutation ratio, going up the sides around this lateral band to be its own quadrant of this particular frequency, with an apex band seen right here, where eventually the necklace will be installed like so. So the big idea why that's important to bring up before the notarization of the crystalline composition is that this is designed to be vaguely resembling a figure 8, if you would, to recirculate and perpetuate the energy in a closed loop circuit for maximum vibrational recirculation yield of this very dynamic intensive construct. Like so, going to lateral band and recirculating through the entirety of this continuity. So of course that works as a great way to govern the excess energy of this extremely ambitious high yield construct to recirculate the containment of the emanation through its own particular crystalline frequency ignition sequence. That'd be very, very helpful for all these other auxiliary components grounded into the primary wire seen right here. So obviously, before I discuss the intricacies of each individual crystalline component, the aspect of all these other frequencies grounded to one single primary wire of copper, brass, and silver spooled together works as the main vein common ground for all these other frequencies to run through an entire vibratory sequence. So you can consider that being the primary ground for all the other frequencies to generate vibrational compound interest, as I discussed the crystalline composition before me, or to put it more simply, also more like organs of this crystalline entity are all seen right here in direct termination. Okay, without further ado, I'll go ahead and discuss the transmutation blade banding seen right here, which makes for a great foundation for the construct, as well as a great dissertation for a very important contingency for such an ambitiously high frequency project. So the aspect of the hematite is a fantastic iron-based mineral that successfully grounds all excessive high frequency or even stray radial energies through the root chakra into the earth stars, into the earth for reprocessing, in tandem with smoky quartz to serve as a subcapacitation agent, performing much of the energy stimulation pathway job of taking all excess energy and firmly grounding it through the entire root chakra into the earth stars and into the earth for reprocessing. So the two of them together is what I have deemed the classic transmutation ratio that is very useful for making the magic real, of course, by keeping it grounded, as well as serving as a lovely contingency for such a high frequency apparatus to give a pathway of the energy through a very grounded transmutation filter by firmly grounding all the excess energy through the root, most importantly through the earth stars and into the earth for reprocessing, which would be its own provision of etheric energetic dialysis at a very constant rate, and like I said before, a way to ensure that this frequency patch actually gets into the earth to, most importantly, make the magic real. So that transmutation sequence ignites like so, seen all the way to this lateral band, up the side right here, like I mentioned, as well as this lateral band to be its own quadrant of a containment of energy to recirculate before it gets to the apex and to here. The pathway, of course, goes through the transmutation ratio from top to bottom to encourage the grounding of this energy through the figure 8, if you would, before it recirculates through the whole process, so which is very encouraging for perpetually self-clearing the apparatus. So at the very apex right here, where the necklace will be eventually installed, is a very complementary blue ray concentration to the gold ray main primary blade band, seen with clear quartz seen right here to be a lovely neutral ambient subcapacitator of the energy, which makes for a very nice neutral ambient programmable frequency, particularly in combination with the conscious self's wielders, to make this certifiedly consciousness-assisted technology that you can wear and wield on the quest of life. Then right here, in between the clear quartz, right here will be lapis lazuli. Lapis lazuli is an amazing classic stone of metaphysical esoteric utilization, that of the wind element of the 5th and 6th chakras. And so of course, it's quite world prolifically famous for being a stone of magic for thousands of years, which has a lot of very powerful morphic field implications to the power the stone has in resonance with the human story. So particularly, this is a stone of Isis in the ancient Egyptian mystery schools. This was believed to be a very powerful stone to awaken one's highest truth. Hence the blue ray stone to stimulate the 5th and 6th chakras in unison. It's very much a stone of highest truth sovereign capacity as well, which would be very, very useful in antithesis with the extremely high gold yield primary blade band. So yep, past life regression, psychic abilities, higher truth, sovereign clarity, wisdom, all these aspects are very much denoted to the legendary lapis lazuli, which is of course a very beautiful stone. Hence it's a favorite of millions for thousands of years for a pretty good reason. So that'd be the circulation. Now we're going straight into the primary blade band seen right here. This is a rather ambitious high frequency yield of the golden ray, which I'll start off with right here with this golden rutilated quartz. So quartz with rutile in that, of golden rutile particularly, makes for a very powerful intense but neutral ambient subcapacitation of the ignition sequence, yet the rutile makes for a massive intensification. So you can think of that being a supercharger for the entire ignition sequence, seen like so, staggered with 3 different crystals. And next to that would be the lovely legendary Libyan gold tektite. It was quite the prized crystalline ally of the pharaohs of old to be carved into scarab beetles and worn as their centerpiece of their breastplate finery, which was of course indicative of their badge of office of being Magi God King of old. So that power was quite amazingly prolifically utilized as a high magic of the royal castes of Egypt, which makes it a very cool fact. But an aspect also, when it comes to stimulation, it has a very powerful fire elemental stimulation of the sacrum and solar plexus, yet it also has a storm overtone that actually stimulates the entire chakra column in unison. So it basically be denoted to a fire and storm energy that's very illuminating to the entire auric field. And so it's also quite the mysterious origin as well. I fondly revert to it as Goldavite, much like Moldavite's golden ray cousin, a very fun energy and dynamic alignment. So its powers of manifestation are quite potent and intense, as well as being a very powerful dharmic accelerant to put one's intent in alignment with their highest truth nature in reality, and to really manifest great situations and quite simply endless joy. Hence, the archetypal name had to have a certain crystalline structure to be able to back the concept of the archetype through the ignition sequence. So Libyan gold tektite is quite the legendary, very amazing, incredible crystal that I do love desperately. It's a very powerful, fun, golden ray energy and very empowering frequency in a lot of ways, of course, too. And heck, if it was good enough for the pharaohs, it's probably good enough for any aspirant in this timeline. They would, of course, actually take great pains to send out teams to find this crystal and bring it back to Egypt. So that's pretty special. So Libyan gold tektite is being accelerated by the rutilated quartz to further intensify the Libyan gold tektite, while the next sequence is actually that of golden healer quartz. Golden healer quartz is a very fantastic high heart stimulant and also a direct gold white light Christ source alignment frequency emanation. So obviously in metaphysical endeavors, or vibrational engineering for that matter, having a very clean attunement to the heart of creation puts the source in sorcery. So that is very advantageous right there too, to have a direct Christ emanation alignment crystalline frequency overlap of the golden healer quartz in tandem with Libyan gold tektite, which is very empowering with the rutilated quartz to super intensify this entire sequence. So that's why this particular construct is such a high yield variety of a typical lightblade talisman based on the ignition sequence of extremely high yield, powerful golden ray concentration that is very indicative also of a Christed heart frequency through the quantum connection of the heart to the highest aspects of spirit manifest. So that makes for a very, very dynamic, very sovereign, empowering device right there, which could be definitely denoted to endless joy. So, like I mentioned before, this would just be the blade band ignition sequence grounding into the transmutation ratio to, of course, run the circuit, then ground into this sequence to further ground this excess energy as it recirculates, then go to the apex vertical with the auric field, of course, when being worn as intended, to run the higher truth aspect, which will make a perfect antithesis to the 5th chakra fortification, to have such a very powerful golden ray emanation, to have sovereign clarity with this configuration. That's particularly why this perfect antithesis of lapis actually is employed in tandem with this golden ray concentration that's also very sacrum stimulating. Anyhow, So like I mentioned 4 times now, this would be the primary blade band scaffolding governing the excess recirculation of the energy of this entire construct. Now it's time to get into the extreme exotic components. So seeing the very tip right here would be a lovely piece of Larimar. Once again, another soothing 5th chakra stimulant contingency to the extremely powerful golden ray yield. So Larimar is an incredible stone found in the early 80s that is the polarities of both fire and water to bring a very powerful 5th and 6th chakra stimulation as well as a very powerful oasis of calm generator that brings sovereign clarity to one's truth in a very, very nice fashion. Actually, of course, that's why it's so employed in many Blu-ray constructs for that purpose. To also be a very powerful beacon and boon to the 5th chakra to increase the clarity and the capacity, which could be denoted to the goddess archetype in that capacity of being in that sovereign truth, and not to mention an nice little antithesis to the lapis as well. Very complementary Blu-ray to the, once again, the extremely high gold yield emanation. Then seen next to the Larimar will be the lovely classic rose quartz in 2 doses right here to be quite simply a very lovely pink ray, high heart, love, divine frequency, complementary auxiliary stimulant. Obviously very useful. Then, it's actually rather jam-packed down here, so I guess I'll talk about the apex blade band right from this angle. I guess that'll work. So at the very, very tip of this light blade scaffolding seen right here would be the fulgurite. Fulgurite is literally the power of lightning when lightning strikes sand. So obviously that's quite powerful stuff. It was classically utilized by First Nation shamans as a spirit tool to intensify their prayers by harnessing the power of lightning and resonance to literally intensify their prayers in connection to creation of the power of lightning for those under the jurisdiction of being medicine men or magic people, serving the spaces, places, and beings under their jurisdiction as magic people. Put it quite simply. So fulgurite is quite the full light body stimulant in its own right to be a very powerful force of lightning energy through the entire containment that's just very, very empowering and very energizing. So luckily, of course, with that kind of force of lightning through the construct, there's many aspects of stabilization and grounding to get most out of that while basically regulating the overture pitch, which will make more sense in a few moments when I discuss this guy. But before I do that, there is one component down here that's quite special, seen right there, called star argonite. Star argonite is a very, very powerful calcium-based full light body stimulant from top to bottom, and works very quickly to dismantle any patterns of impediments or diseases, dis-ease, I mean to say, from top to bottom very quickly. So it's very, very conducive, clearing, full light body activator in its own right, as well as it's actually a one of the master crystals I utilize and quite prolifically in a trinity of crystals of the star argonite, the seraphinite, and the Tibetan black quartz to be a very powerful triumphant trifecta of healing capacity, which of course I'll get in momentarily once I get my way up here to, which is the other side of the talisman, which is a lot of talking between here and there. But anyhow, I digress. But the point is that star argonite is a very fantastic all-purpose full light body healer on a calcium range, which basically means it works to clear any of these patterns very quickly, very gently, in a very nice manner. Hence, it's become a staple of my life's work for a very good reason. So above that is a rather critical component that gets quite tinfoil hat-ish, I guess, and meta, to put it lightly, to discuss in coherence and clarity, but it has a very far-out intrinsic critical role to a high-performance light blade device, such as a talisman like this. That would be the smoky celestial quartz seen right here. So smoky quartz, like mentioned in the transmutation scaffolding, is a fantastic grounder of negativity by firmly grounding all the excess energy to the root into the earth for reprocessing. So it makes for a fantastic transmutation agent. But where it gets quite out of the box, to put it nicely, is the aspect of the celestial structure has a certain way of resonating with the auric field to work as an auto-regulator of the entire frequency pitch of the entire device at large. And what that means, it works like a surge protector or a dimmer switch to ensure the frequency pitch of this entire construct is in a very comfortable, compatible range in resonance with the conscious self who is wielding this construct, which is very dynamic and very auto-calibrating to the optimal configurations in real-time situations at a very, very transcendent rate, to put it lightly. And so what that means also, of course, is that to try to say this simply, is that This dimmer switch, of course, will increase the frequency pitch as needed by the wielder as under their jurisdiction of practicing, or it will basically slow down the revs and bring it more of a concentrated auto-calibration pitch to further ground the energy. It's very reactive and reflexive, so to speak, and that's where it gets quite meta to try to describe, but it does indeed play an absolute critical role in very high yield devices, such as a construct like this, to have a very powerful auto-regulation dynamic frequency regulation that's very dynamic and very comfortable, most importantly, to the conscious self who is wielding this, to ensure the right amount of frequency pitch governed through this entire device is in the basically the premium optimum in accordance to the higher self and in tandem with the conscious self at any given moment. I hope that made a lot more sense than it sounded, probably. But basically, it's a great efficiency resonance contingency to ensure the right frequency pitch is always in flux, quite simply. I probably could have said that without the wordy, flowery explanation, but I tend to digress quite a bit in these videos. So, right above that would be a very special piece of Himalayan golden azeztulite. Much like golden healer quartz, it's a very powerful golden ray crystal from the Himalayas that has a very, very powerful gold white light source, high heart stimulation as well of 2 straight shot source energy. So obviously having 2 different varieties of the same frequency pitch generates its own vibrational compound interest of gold source emanation alignment, which of course is very advantageous to cover all bases to make that clean shot alignment of the gold white light source energy, which, puts the source in sorcery, as far as I'm concerned. Then, next to that would be a lovely guy right here of amber. Though not technically a mineral, amber is a crystalline ally that has been well utilized for a very long time for transmuting negativity into positivity, as well as being a stone of abundance, because simply it makes energy good and takes negativity, much like smoky quartz, and turns it into positivity through more of a solar plexus solar stimulation that works very effectively to, of course, take all negativity and transmute it into positivity through a more of a higher octave sunny disposition opposed to a very strong ground point, which of course works great in tandem with smoky quartz. Then next to that, well concealed at this point so it doesn't run away during its lifetime with its recipient, is nickel iron meteorite, seen down right here, which is literally space metal. So that's pretty neat, is that the iron base of nickel iron meteorite makes a very strong grounding, just like hematite, to ensure the excess frequency grounds through the system. But where it really shines, though, is that since it's literally extraterrestrial metal, that has a very powerful higher chakra stimulation as well, 6/7, as well as being a very powerful extraterrestrial stimulant, put quite simply, but thank goodness a very strong iron base, since it has found iron, which is of course a very powerful grounding frequency in our creation on the periodic table here on Earth. So that makes for a very, very cool way to ground in high frequency energies in a more tangible range as well. And like I mentioned thrice, it's a space metal, so that's kind of cool. Then above that, to make a nice little further high octave intensification of the entire blade face right here, terminated directly above the nickel iron meteorite would be Herkimer diamond. Herkimer diamond is quite the famous crystal, quite in vogue these days for being a very clean spectrum of quartz that's very high vibration. So Herkimer diamonds, of course, very stimulation to the 6/, 7th, and higher chakras is quite profound, as well as it makes for a massive amplifier or intensifier of other frequencies, I guess, or a supercharger, much like root-related quartz, to further intensify an entire circuit with high divine frequency light. So that's another way to have another dose of divine intensification through the entire structure, and brings great clarity to the mind, and basically is a very powerful boon to alignment to the higher realms. Then right above that would be lovely legendary turquoise. So even a small dose of turquoise goes a long way to be an impeccable 5th chakra stimulant based on the aspects of the Lakota terrestrial medicine wheel of earth, fire, water, and wind, thereby being a very powerful blue ray stone of wholeness. So obviously, like lapis, it's a favorite of millions for thousands of years for a very good reason, because it's just quite simply beautiful, and also its metaphysical properties are nothing to sneeze at as far as I'm concerned. There is quite the amazing crystal of clarity and truth and one's true sovereign wholeness, which even a small dose goes a long way. Also, more physically speaking, it's a great, since it's a full elemental spectrum generated of earth, fire, water, and wind, it makes for a very fantastic pranic acceleration, almost like a storm energy, I guess, of the elements combined, to bring a very powerful dynamic fluctuation, oxygenization of the entire meridian system and the pranic, basically a pranic induction intensifier, to keep it simple. Then, above these two selenites, which I will omit till the very end of this video intentionally to be a nice capstone, will be chaurite. Okay. So chaurite is an incredible violet ray crystal that is very stimulating to the 6th and 7th chakras, but where it truly shines with the black dendritic barely seen in this video, as well as white calcite, is that the black dendritic actually takes the higher frequency soul star stimulation and actually has its own, in its own matrix, a nice earth star stimulation, with the calcite to be a very powerful clearing agent. So quite simply, chaurite can be denoted to being a very lovely violet ray dharmic accelerant that is very effective for bringing high frequency energy into the body, and most importantly, grounding it into itself without having to rely on other frequencies to assist in that capacity. So this is why I would say that chaurite is perhaps my favorite violet crystal, because it's a one-stop metaphysical powerhouse. It's very dynamic and self-contained in its effectivity to bring essentially heaven through the soul star to earth through the earth star. So 2 doses of that goes a very long way to also produce a very powerful etheric transmutation shield that's a very high yield consistent as well. And not to mention, like I mentioned 5 times too, in tandem with everything else here, in a dynamic reactive sentient crystalline device creature right here goes a long way to bring that violet flame of purification through the entire apparatus. So I'll go ahead and discuss the other side of the blade face before I discuss this section. And also, of course, this is a lot to talk about, so I'll be clearing my throat quite a bit at this point, because, yeah, keeping this coherent and linear and straight is quite the ordeal. So at the very bottom right here, it's a lovely specimen of black tektite. This is a product of nickel-iron meteorite impacting the sand when it comes from space into Earth. So black tektite can be considered a meteoric obsidian from the heat and the pressure of the impact of meteorites that actually hit sand to make this crystal. So black tektite is an absolute staple in my work for many very good reasons. Black tektite is a very powerful grounding frequency of extraterrestrial, superterrestrial energy entering the Earth from a cosmic impact. So that jolt of energy that literally forms this is imprinted in the crystalline structure to be a very powerful, and thank goodness, black ray, Earth star stimulant through the entire chakra column in its own right. So what that means too, in more of a practical, pragmatic dissertation, is that it raises the vibration from the ground up all the way through at a very high yield, consistent rate to bring the threshold of vibration at a very, very high premium consistently, which is very helpful for simply, quite tangibly, raising vibrational foundation from, luckily, the ground up. So that's why, of course, that crystal is found in virtually all light tech, no matter what designation, for that very practical cosmic boost accelerant. And luckily from a very grounded perspective of literally grounding cosmic space energy into the Earth in a very stimulating way. So it's, of course, a very powerful dharmic accelerant in its own right, as well as a nice Kundalini stimulator as well. And continuing on to another Kundalini stimulator. Seen right here, this is actually something called infinitite, which is a very special rare variety of serpentine from South Africa. So infinitite, just like serpentine, is a very fantastic natural serpentine Kundalini stimulant. Yet the infinitite has a very special structure to actually decrystallize patterns of anything impeding the light body's perfect flowing health that be naturally impeding the flow of a very healthy functional light body, such as ancestral imprintations, wounds, self-imposing beliefs, scarcity aspects, confidence blockages, all things of that nature are very well addressed by this particular decrystallization of patterns that would be playing out in someone's life, manifesting as a reality. So this is a very amazing also for insulating high frequency energy, as well as being an etheric shield in its own right that's quite effective in basically keeping the optimal pattern of the auric field in a high flux consistently. So this is also a very protecting, insulating, shielding frequency as well. And to complement that right there, would be a lovely big old bolt of ruby. So ruby is a pretty famous crystal for a very good reason, because ruby is perhaps the unsurpassed root chakra stimulant in the mineral kingdom, oftentimes clocking in about an 8.5 to 9 out of hardness on the out of 10, the hardness scale, which means its dense atomical structure of the red ray is so dense that the vivid vibration it produces is very, very strong. Hence, in this day and age, ruby has received quite the deification of its crystalline essence in legend for thousands of years, for a good reason now. And of course, it has a lot of imprintation in the morphic field of humanity. Everybody literally knows what ruby is. Even if they're not a crystal enthusiast, it's just quite simply a precious stone of antiquity and royalty. So the legendary connotation of ruby is quite vast. But the aspect of why ruby is so great here is that unsurpassed root chakra stimulant is so powerful and profound in bringing high frequency red grounding energy to enlighten the base chakra. That's very, very helpful in a very dynamic talisman as well, particularly in conjunction with the infinitite right here to decrystallize anything that be in the way of an optimal root chakra stimulation at a consistent yield. Okay. So moving on to this guy right here is a rather exotic, very special, rare crystal that is very hard to find, but thank the force, I have my ways and Providence is with me. This is a golden ray crystal called Brazilianite. You'll never guess it, but it comes from Brazil. But it's a very, very rare, obscure crystal that's very hard to find, so I'm quite excited to be able to incorporate this guy in this very ambitious golden ray stimulant as well. So Brazilianite, much like Libyan gold tektite, is a very excellent, very powerful solar plexus engagement stimulant. Yet the aspect of Brazilianite has a very interesting aspect of being very much in touch with the Atlantean magic of old. It has a certain quantum waypoint alignment of old school Atlantean magic, which of course is a foundation of my life's work. Found here is very much the old consciousness-assisted technology concepts of the Atlantean structures and whatnot. So that makes for a very cool, special, dynamic, further alignment to almost cut through the red tape of the conscious self to remember the astral muscle memory of being in touch with the Atlantean utilization of magic, basically, which was way more profound than we can almost imagine this timeline, to put it lightly. And so the aspect right there is even that dose of Brazilianite right here is very, very complementary by having that frequency of the old school magic in tandem with Libyan gold tektite to put one in a very powerful position of personal power through sovereign understanding, essentially. Then above that is another very lovely violet ray crystal named sugilite. That's rather hard to come by these days, but once again, the will of the force has a way of providing me things to bring it to the highest level. So sugilite is a very nice crystal that has a nice purple ray with slight black in it right there that has a very powerful 6th, 7th, 8th, all the non-physical chakra stimulation as well. So it's a very, very clean shot straight back to the conscious God self connection voice, basically, the higher self and the conscious self, as well as makes for a very high frequency bubble of light energy as well by having such a high frequency induction stimulation of the auric field. Oh, actually, that's actually my paperweight. It's not there for looks, it's actually there to keep this whimsical stick figure chakra map in place. Anyhow, enough digression. Clear the throat one more time and continue on sugilite. So sugilite right here is also very, very fantastic for the higher emanations of the witness self, as well as being a very nice frequency alignment to the force of Michael or Michael the Archangel, which is very advantageous in any metaphysical endeavor, as far as I'm concerned. So it makes for a very high yield, divine bubble of light protection to the conscious self as well, and fills the whole entire auric field with a very high frequency energy as well. Okay, so the last thing I'll discuss on the blade face before I circle back to the selenites will be this lovely specimen of golden zincite. So zincite is quite the powerful, dynamic, potent stuff that I utilize very sparingly without, of course, with many contingencies in mind. But zincite is a stimulant of the lower three chakras, unsurpassed mineral kingdom. The hurricane dynamic fire force this produces is very powerful to the solar plexus, the sacrum, and the base chakra in virtually, I'd say, an unrivaled fashion of extremely powerful stimulation that actually will burn off and blow out any restrictions of the lower three chakras. So naturally, with such a very powerful gold ray emanation sovereign device, the zincite here is very potent and powerful for really bringing the lower three in line. So not to mention, of course, by now, in about half hour later at this point, there's many different frequency contingencies to get the most out of this, while like basically redirecting and buffering and keeping the flow of the energy very well established with the infinitite to further decrystallize the stimulations of the zincite. So they basically, of course, consistently auto-purify the entire lower three scaffolding, which is very advantageous for the in-the-body experience, obviously. So zincite is very, very powerful, full light body stimulation as well. By having such a powerful stimulation of the lower three, it also, of course, encourages the higher frequency anchoring of the higher chakras as well, which is very helpful for a wielder of high psychic capacity, which, of course, this talisman, of course, is going to. So that's going to be a very lovely, very powerful, prominent stimulation of the lower three chakras to the highest yield pretty much possible. Then, before I move on to this section where the hood will be installed, I'll discuss the hood. So seen like this, of course, once this is done, this will be well aesthetically placed, but this will at least do for now to give a concept. So this golden leather actually serves more than aesthetics. Actually, aesthetics might be the last prerogative of the construct. So the golden leather placed right here is designed to serve as a way to protect all the subtle stones seen right here that are terminated like so that of course they are safe and sound as they're being wielded by the recipient on the adventures of magic, whatnot. And also, it plays for a color therapy resonance to have a further golden ray focus emanation that'd be very indicative of the stimulation of the solar plexus to a very high yield. And also, very important too, see in this little sub-rant, the aspect of the gold leather seen right here will also work as an insulator to condense the high frequency radial energy through the, more importantly, through the primary blade band as well as the apex band as it completes its sequence. So actually that plays a very critical role to further insulate the energy for further energetic efficiency that basically channels the energy more effectively through the primary blade band than the apex band, so there's less energy leakage basically dispersing through this complex network. And also, against D, it does look like a nice finished construct once it's, of course, aesthetically placed on there, but the aesthetics there are the last of the progress, quite literally. So this section would be the hood that will eventually be wrapped up. That has its own dynamic subroutine in its own right. So I'll go ahead and start off with this guy right here, which is Morganite. Morganite is actually a pink ray cousin to Emerald, seen right here, which means it's in the beryl family, which has a 7.5 to 8 or more in the hardness scale, with just like a beryl fan like aquamarine and emerald, it's an exotic nature crystal. So I'm sure that if this crystal was discovered in ancient times with aquamarine, ruby, emerald, things of that nature, this would be a stone of legend as well, but this is a more modern discovery in the family. So much like rose quartz, it's of course an amazing pink ray heart chakra stimulant, yet the morganite has a much denser atomical structure, which means the emanation of the pink ray is way more vivid and intense than general rose quartz, for example. So even a small dose of that strong pink ray emanation goes a long way in a closed loop circuit. And to further back that concept right here will be a very special quadrant of ruby and zoisite in 2 doses right here to get the most out of that frequency in tandem with tanzanite. But I'll start with the ruby and zoisite. So ruby, like mentioned before, in a very prominent size piece on the other blade face over here, is a very powerful root chakra stimulant, unsurpassed in mineral kingdom, and hence it's been deified and made quite legendary by human crystalline magical connotations. A stone of royalty, for that matter, of course, and courage and enthusiasm and zest for life, which is synergetically grown into zoisite. So zoisite is a very fantastic green ray heart-mind coherence stimulant. So when you take the trifecta of the gusto for life of ruby found naturally in the heart-mind coherence perpetuation of zoisite, that makes for a very dynamic true self overlap to encourage growth into who one really is in connection to creation before all the imprintations, bombardments, and conditioning that basically shapes us away from our true divine essence, which is the human condition pretty much. Then to support that would be a very special variety of blue zoisite named tanzanite. So that's its trade name, tanzanite, but scientifically it is actually a blue ray cousin to zoisite, the green crystal right here, found in the same area but only for one mine for this particular alteration, which is quite special. So tanzanite is, bar none, the most profound and proficient heart-mind coherent stimulant in the mineral kingdom, to be a lovely stimulation to the 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th chakras in perfect dynamic unison. So that is the impeccable heart-mind coherent circulation seen right here. So obviously, before I continue further in tanzanite, whenever zincite is employed, I always make sure to employ tanzanite somewhere else to be the perfect complementary antithesis to have the impeccable 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th higher chakra stimulation, while the zincite down here makes for the ultimate lower 3 in the body experience stimulation for dynamic full resonance or equilibrium. So that's a little side fact also. It's one of the important things to employ with zincite, that powerhouse of creation, is the tanzanite seen right here. So enough of that. So the aspect also of tanzanite being obviously a 4th and 5th stimulant is also impeccable speaking from the heart agent. Then a 5th and 6th stimulant, also of course the 5th and 6th being the conscious self as well as the insights of the third eye. Then the aspect of the crown and the soul star makes for a very clean, dynamic heart-mind coherence that's unrivaled in the mineral kingdom is, of course, tanzanite, which is blue version of zoisite, because it has more of a 5th chakra focused truth element as well. So that would be tanzanite. So of course these two together make for the ruby and zoisite, and the tanzanite right here make for a very powerful heart-mind coherence trifecta seen right here in this subcircuit right here, to be very encouraging. Then right here is shungite, a black gray carbon-based crystal quite in vogue these days for being quite famous for successfully mitigating 5G wavelengths, or basically unnatural subtle radiation wavelengths that are from cell phone towers, 5G, things of that nature, as well as being a very powerful carbon-based charcoal filter, if you would, of turning negativity into positivity as well. So that's another little small dose. So even a small dose of shungite right here goes a very long way in further self-purifying the entire energy emanation in tandem with the auric field. So that's a nice little dose of that. Then right here is seraphinite, a very special green ray crystal named after the seraphim archangels, which is, like I mentioned a while ago now at this point of this dissertation, is one of the holy crystal trinities I utilize quite frequently of seraphinite, the star argonite, and the black Tibetan quartz, which I'll discuss them individually. And then, of course, once I get to this guy, I'll talk about the synchronicity of them all. Anyway, gotta stay on target here. So the seraphinite is, bar none, perhaps the most powerful light body healer in the mineral kingdom to bring extreme healing continuity to our auric field through the root chakra, through the entire resonant energy. So the aspect of seraphinite also brings the seraphim archangels into a very powerful alignment with the I am template of the auric field's perfect calibration, which also means that this guy works as a full light body stimulant from top to bottom and vice versa, and rapidly, impeccably dismantles energy patterns of dis-ease in all capacities. Hence, it's a very premier healing crystal to be well utilized in my life's work for that exact reason. And like mentioned with the star argonite, the same kind of pathway, they generate vibrational compound interest to support each other, to be both full light body stimulants and work very quickly together to clear patterns of dis-ease from top to bottom. Then right here would be emerald. Emerald, another quite famous green ray stone of abundance. Seen right here is the impeccable green ray heart chakra stimulant, which I'm just going to keep on cruising because this video is getting longer. But that's a great little homage to emerald. Then peridot, another frequency of famous abundance, is a very fantastic 3rd and 4th chakra stimulant of earth energy. This is water, sorry. And so, emerald that is. And the aspect of the peridot also is basically the vibrational equivalent to chlorophyll of growth, which of course how this all happens right here. And that makes for a very nice abundance increaser as well, and just also very good vibes. Then clear quartz to be a neutral energizer between the sunstone. Sunstone's a very fantastic feldspar base sacrum and solar plexus stimulant, of very sunny, good vibes. And that would be the entirety of the hood notarized. So, once again, at the very tip, this is Tibetan black quartz, which has been strategically placed to be at basically in showcase position at all times to be almost a top point of the top engine, if you would. There's many components, so it's hard to basically make that kind of absolute designation. So the aspect of the Tibetan black quartz seen right here is also from Tibet, and just like I mentioned thrice with the star aragonite and the seraphinite, is a full light bistimulant of grounding high frequency energy as well as extreme expansions simultaneously through the higher chakras. So it makes for a very dynamic full healing resonance as well as being a very lovely Om resonance generator, because of course from Tibet, the I'd say indisputable, most concentrated, consistent place in the world with spiritual dedication, one region of constant spiritual enlightenment, attainment of meditation in one region in the area, definitely leaves a mark on the entirety of the world scale. So that course comes from there, which has a very, very nice Om resonant frequency. So it's almost like a force field of Om frequency as well, which can be denoted to a psychic protection energy agent as well in that connotation. Okay, perfect. All right, so that'd be most of the construct described besides a few more auxiliary things. So, fun fact also, before I go further, the core of the device is actually oak from Sedona, Arizona. That actually is grounded into the Village Oak Creek waterway. So it means the root system of this host wood right here is actually grounded into the most consistent waterway through Sedona, which is quite special. But anyway, the oak band is a very dense topical strengthening wood, which is a very long dissertation in its own right at this point after 41 minutes, which I may omit a lot, but basically it's a legendary wood of the gods, the kings, heroes, a very strong strengthening wood with great legend also. So oak is a great dense atomical structure for the foundation of this device, particularly from the Ruby City, Sedona, Arizona, so that's a fun fact. Okay. So I go ahead and describe the focalizers seen right here before I discuss the last capstone of the selenite and the black kyanite. So Lemurian clear quartz is a very fantastic neutral subcapacitator of energy, and also the employment of focalizers on talisman is rather rare because it's kind of an ambitious overture to perform, but as staggered right here, these work to focalize energy at a kind of a wider arc range, as you see the wider spread of energy. So that aspect too is it takes the entirety of the blade band's figure 8 and grounds into the primary wire to be a focus of energy, which actually, of course, could actually be very encouraging for broadcasting frequency, to put it lightly, like so. As well as Lemurian quartz, of course, is quite the legendary variety of clear quartz that's very nice, and it makes for nice little auxiliary wings, if you would, to further focus the radial energy of the closed circuit and broadcast it with most importantly a wider rake. So the energy pathway has more of a wider spread, if you would, which would be very nice in a very passive configuration to further encourage downward momentum energy, or wherever the wielder, of course, is called to wield this guy, essentially. And also, it makes for a nice neutral energization, which of course puts it further in the realm of consciousness-assisted technology to be in tune with the impulses of energy of the conscious self wielding this construct to put current further into the entire construct to intensify the yield and basically program it. Okay. So at the very last right here, I will discuss the selenites. So by the time this whole 43-minute dissertation has gone, this selenite has been saved for last for its distinct purpose. So selenite by itself is a fantastic white ray wind elemental 6th, 7th, 8th non-physical chakra stimulant all the way to one's godhead as a very impeccable clean shot to the conscious self and the highest self in crystalline format. So under that high frequency induction as well, it also works as a great way to have divine transmutation to burn off stagnant energies from top to bottom of lower density. But where it really shines in a lightblade, oh, I got a frog in my throat, 1 second. Might as well drink something, take a little moment. I've only been ranting for 44 minutes, so doing pretty good all things considered. So the aspect also of the selenite in this closed loop reactive circuit, and why it's saved for last, is for exactly this purpose. So by itself, like mentioned, it's a fantastic connection point to one's dharmic template or godhead or highest self to the conscious self, which is already inherently amazing, and the whole prerogative of spirit tools, I dare say. to have authentic empowerment to their divine connection. But the aspect also is that the entire closed-loop reactive circuit of all these crystals mentioned so far are purified by the selenite through this entire reactive circuit. They're also intensified or amplified, and most importantly perhaps, they're also harmonized and brought into equilibrium. So when you have the triumphant trifecta of the purification of this entire circuit on its own subroutine, then going into the amplification and intensification, then the harmonization, equilibrium of the entire pitch, that always makes for the grounds for a truly triumphant trifecta, that is the grounds of a functional spirit tool. So that would be that. And then for this guy, with this extremely high yield pitch, the exclusive utilization of black kyanite was employed on both sides of the selenite seen right here. So the aspect of black kyanite being chosen exclusively is to be a very powerful black ray encourager of rapid grounding energy through the Earth stars at a very quick rate. So kyanites, for the matter, are very quick transfers of energy, which of course can be employed in different variations of different configurations such as green and orange and blue, for example, and black. But black has been chosen exclusively for this device to encourage the rapid transfer as a surge protector of the excess yield to ensure the high frequency pitch is consistently being directed into the earth at a very high volume very, very quickly. Hence my pen movement is trying to mimic the concept for illustrative purposes of, of doing this. Because black kyanite is the most effective rapid ground in the Middle Kingdom, and kyanites, for that matter, are such rapid transfers of energy that they literally cannot maintain stagnant energy, which means that the transfer of the energy is so rapid and quick that it works as a rapid auto-calibration as well, or I guess another layer of etheric Teflon from any energy influence to rapidly ground so quickly that it'd be very, very remiss to stay inside this auric field overlap when this guy is engaged, essentially. And by golly, about 46.5 minutes later, I think that's the entire composition of this ambitious endless droid construct. So, little closing remarks now. So obviously, this guy is developed to be technically worn on the person to be a very powerful energy resonance in engagement with the auric field, most importantly with the prayers and intentions of the recipient running charge through this to serve as a very powerful electromagnetic interference inhibitor, or ego-mind identity, my other three favorite letter acronym, and to be a very powerful sovereign empowering device that would be much in promotion of endless joy by being in touch with one's true essence in despite of the false self-imputations would be the big idea right there. All right, well, 1,000 blessings, and may the force be with us all.